I'm here with Christopher, one of my dear friends, talking about the Book of the Dead. He's reading it, and he has some questions.
In fact, I do. Well, one of the first things that intrigued me about the Book of the Dead is the evolution throughout the series of chambers is starting from a state of high energy and going to a state of lower and lower and lower energy levels until finally rebirth, it becomes inevitable. You know, the American Book of the Dead will even warn you throughout the sequence of chambers that as you, especially once you get below the level of the Wrathful guides, they start to say things like, well, there is still a chance of spontaneous liberation at this moment, but it's just a lot less likely, and at a certain point, rebirth becomes inevitable. And that was not how I had thought about it. Usually I would think about starting from a level of being lower and then working your way up. And this is the opposite. What are your thoughts on that evolution?
It's an interesting thing because in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Sumerian Book of the Dead, you go through the ladder of lights, and there is a sequence of going up. And there is this sense of progression as you move through them. That's really not in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Tibetans were the first ones to see the cyclical nature of the Bardo dynamic. And what I mean by that was all these other cultures saw life as being one thing and death as being something very, very different and kind of a one-time deal. Even though in Egypt they did talk about other worlds or even coming back to this world, they had a reincarnation. It was much more like you're choosing these things, and there was a feeling of like purpose and meaning in it. The Buddhists were the first ones to recognize that it was cyclical, so that means that it's going around and around, and that it's not so much progressing as much as it's cycling. Progression is possible. The opportunity to evolve, that's the main message in the Book of the Dead, is that we have the opportunity to evolve and see beyond our primate reactions. That is there for us, but it's not inherent. It's not like we will naturally evolve if we just allow it, just go with the flow. You have to make an effort to evolve. And the Buddhist thought, or like to wake up in the Bardos, there's effort involved and preparation. Like you don't have much chance of waking up in the Bardos if you don't wake up in the Bardo of life and recognize how dreamlike things are now, here.
And train yourself to recognize it and to maintain concentration and awareness. The Book of the Dead will say that over and over again. Don't allow yourself to succumb to panic at this point. Don't allow yourself to fall asleep.
Yes, don't fall into primate reactions.
Fear.
Yes, and that is totally applicable to now. And now is the place that we cultivate it so that when we do die, we are prepared. Because we've cultivated the habit in us. Because what we have in the Bardo is what it calls the body of habits. The body we have, which cannot be destroyed. It's an indestructible body because it's a projected form of who we were. But each day in the Bardo, in the radiance, it becomes more and more tenuous.
So what you're saying is that all our practices in life are part of the body of habits, and the longer we are in the Bardo state, the more that begins to erode.
Yes, yes. Except that the body, like right now, we're in a karmic physical body. We're building the body of habits. When we die, we're in the body of habits. It's like a energetic remnant of what we were. Now, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they say we have 7 souls, and each one of the ladder of lights is a different part of the soul that needs to find a rest. It needs to correlate to that place, to that gate, and then the soul moves on, but that shell of the soul stays at that gate. This is also, it corresponds to the idea of the seven chakras.
So 7 souls, and at each chamber you're leaving behind.
They're almost like it's the soul, the shell. It has to find a resonance with that place, or it can't move on, and that will disturb the moving on of the other ones. They all have to, and that's in the Egyptian idea, is that a lot of ghosts are parts of a soul that have not found their
resonance.
Exactly, and that's really what it is a resonance with each of the...
How do you feel that these different views of the Bardo like correlate, or...
Well, yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think that a lot of it is cultural dynamics. Ultimately, there is no self going through the Bardo. The clearest realization, the realization of clear light, is that nothing is happening. Nothing ever has happened. Nothing ever will happen. It is the end of all stories, but it's also the beginning point of all stories, so you can't really, doesn't have a positive or negative quality. This is what the Tibetans call clear light. That realization is not in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So there's certain, and I think that's because the Tibetans were yogis that were practicing levels of meditation that the Egyptians were not practicing. The Egyptians also, the second stage of guides, there are 3 stages of guides in the Book of the Dead: the peaceful, then the semi-wrathful, and wrathful. And the semi-wrathful have animal heads and human bodies. And those were the Egyptians' gods. And they were also the gods of every culture, every shamanic culture around the world, which says to me that those cultures were basically dealing with the second level of the macro dimensions on a regular basis. And their mythologies were emerging from this second level of the macro dimensions, which is in a way even beyond the peaceful guides, which are the primary facilitating force. The peaceful guide, they're all different aspects of the light spectrum, but you could say they're different levels of dynamic. The peaceful guides are a very slow moving, calm dynamic. The animal-headed guides are a more turbulent, moving towards a storm. And the third stage of guides, which are the Harukas, the wrathful ones, those are pure storm, pure apocalypse. And yeah, they are very, very hard to integrate and deal with. So it's a very complex subject. The guides don't have any set forms. They appear as we make them appear. In different times I've had macro-dimensional experiences, I've seen the guides as African warriors that were like 9 feet tall with huge headdresses and spikes and spears and all kinds of black and red, and they were immense, but their presence was unbearable, and they will only look like that for a second because I made them that way. They really are this energy that is beyond any particular form of pure, gosh, how do you describe it? It's an apocalypse and creative force at the same time. They're the active form of the clear light, and that's actually what all the guides are. The clear light is the absolute form, and then the rest of the whole guides are the spectrum of light as it's unfolding, and we're just passing through it. And the journey, we're not actually going anywhere. We're going into ourselves. We're going into the light. So the whole projected journey of the ladder of lights and going somewhere is actually an internal journey. And so, yeah, even though we don't have a body, but you can have it when you're in the body. And that's when you really have to recognize it, is now. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like us and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified for when we post new videos. We really would encourage you to ask any questions that you have. We would love to answer them and address them in any way possible. And we will talk to you soon. And remember, stay focused on the question.